Hello and welcome back to the Stacey West YouTube channel and to another monthly show. The month of March has been and gone. And God, what a month it was to be a Lincoln City fan. I am, of course, joined by Mr. Lamming. Chris, how are we doing, sir?
Oh, very well. Very well indeed. It's impossible not to be, I think, at the moment as a Lincoln City supporter. I don't think I need to ask how you are, but I'll be polite. How are you?
Struggling today. I can't really talk. Not really ideal when we're trying to do a monthly show because I don't think I've celebrated a 1-0 victory like that for a long, long time. That roar when the goal went in, I honestly can't remember any roar quite like that. That was unbelievably special. I was talking to a couple of people after the game who, you know, we're in the Lincoln end, would call themselves Lincoln fans, or for this season anyway, and they haven't been to a game since Reading at home when we drew 1-1, and they turned around and said the change in atmosphere and the change in the performance on the pitch between those two matches, they've never seen anything like it. I think that's pretty correct, isn't it, Chris?
Yeah. I think we've seen the beginnings of improvement under Michael Skubala as soon as he came into the club. But my goodness me, we're a completely different side now than we were when he took over. But yeah, on that goal yesterday against Leyton Orient, I don't think I've celebrated a goal like that since we scored early in the playoff final against Blackpool. I lost my mind at that moment, and I lost my mind equally yesterday. It was just what a moment it was for us all to enjoy. So obviously we're going to talk about the significance of that along with the rest of the month and look ahead to the upcoming month of April. But yeah, just on that individual moment, just walking away from the ground yesterday, just full of cries. Honestly, I just welled up a little bit because it just felt, I don't know, I was overcome a little bit. So I'm sure I wasn't the only one. But it's just so nice to leaving Central Bank these days with our step, isn't it?
It was so special. You just want to embrace everybody that's around you, and it's that moment in itself will forever be remembered now. But I agree with you, walking out the ground, and it just, we've been saying for so long, and it's the easiest thing to say, and it's become a bit of a cliche, maybe something special's happening at Lincoln City, and it is, and it's pulsing through every single fan. You've got the manager and the players clearly in such unity. When you got Joe Taylor having been subbed off the pitch and a little bit of a grumpy because he's, you know, maybe a little bit disappointed that they're still drawing and he's being subbed off, and yet Jovan scores and he's immediately running over. But look, we'll get into all of the games, including what happened yesterday, right about now. So let's have a little look at March's results. And here they are on screen now then. Everybody knows March's results. I probably didn't even need to create a graphic for this, to be fair, did I, Chris? But let's just have a little look through them. We started the month with a 0-0 draw at home to Stevenage, and that was it. Playoff hopes over.
Yeah, guys and I did the podcast that day, and we both thought, yeah, that's it. It'll be fun until the end of the season. We're planning for this for next season now, but that's realistically our playoff hopes in tatters. And well, how wrong were we?
This is it. We all said it's not happening. To be fair, from the very start of this run, as much as we kind of joked about it, I was never going to really be that sort of excited about it. And then, you know, we drew at home to Stevenage. It's like, yeah, okay, that's definitely it. Because I think by that point, we would have needed to win 9 of our last 11 games. And it's like, it's just not going to happen, is it? Like, let's not be silly here. It's now only 4 from 6 if we even want to hit 76 points, and there's a good chance we might need less than that the way other teams are performing around us. So, but we'll get on to that in a little bit. Away at Barnsley, yeah, that was special. That was very special. 5-1. That's a massive standout result, and that's very much the one that made teams around us sit up and notice us. Cambridge at home, again, 6-0. Suddenly it was, oh my God, they've done it back-to-back sort of thing. Bristol Rovers, 5-0 on the 16th. Again, 3 games in a row. When was the last time teams have done this? Record breakers and things like that. Then Leyton Orient yesterday, which I have just realised is away. No, it isn't.
It's fine.
Yeah,
everyone knows it was at home. Don't you?
It'll be too much of a nightmare to change that. So and then obviously the 1-0 victory, as we've already mentioned, with Jovan scoring in the last minute. Now, Chris, I want to just pick up on something for a second, because we'll go into sort of the euphoria of all these results in a minute, because they were all so special for so many different reasons as well. But I want to pick up on the fact that on paper, even though I have made the mistake, 4 of the 5 games were at home. So you'd maybe think that that's going to give us a competitive edge. You know, we're facing teams at home. Maybe you're expected to get slightly better results, and maybe we can't read too much into the results overall, and we may therefore struggle in the month of April if we've got more away games, that sort of thing. And that could very much be the case on the outside looking in. Until you then look at the one away game, and that was against promotion, potentially automatic promotion hopefuls at that point, Barnsley. That was the away game, and we smashed them 5-1. Who's stopping us at the minute?
Well, I think that's the point, isn't it? Is that even the most pessimistic of Lincoln City supporter has to have an element of confidence right now. And from an opposition perspective, you're just not going to want to play us. I have to admit, I was really impressed with Leyton Orient yesterday, particularly in the first half. I thought they nullified us. And bearing in mind that we scored 16 goals in our previous 3 matches, it's pretty important from an Orient perspective to stop us playing. And they didn't create a huge amount themselves, though they did have the better chances, certainly in the first half of the game, and probably the second for the majority of it as well, though I thought we looked a lot more comfortable in the second half. But particularly in the first half, I was just really impressed with them in regards to just how they stopped us playing. But we still conceded less than 1 XG for the whole game. So, yeah, we didn't get anywhere near the level that we were at in the previous 3 games in terms of our in-possession play. And I think that was more credit to Orient, and also the fact that we were missing Ethan Arahan. I think that had a big part to play. But I think what Orient have probably shown there is a little bit of a blueprint of how to stop us playing. But yeah, no one knows how to actually break us down yet. And you mentioned that the majority of these games are at home. You expect teams to come slightly deeper, slightly more robust, slightly less adventurous, and expect us to come on to them. And of course, we've kind of won those games convincingly on the whole, and squeezed past Orient there as well. But I think our defensive solidity is something that's worth touching on. Now, I know we're going to touch on this later as well, because that's even more important away from home, I think, because every team that's playing at home against us, so for our away games, there's going to be an element of expectation there, an element of you can't just sit back and defend for 90 minutes. I'm not saying that Leyton Orient or anyone did that, but you can expect teams that come to Stinsel Bank against a team, or any team that's on the sort of run that we are. If you're going away to that team, I think it's expected for you to be a bit more conservative in your approach. But at home, you still want to try and engage them, don't you? You still want to try and have an attacking output and impact the game. So I don't actually think it's that significant now that we're playing a few of our games away from home in the coming month. I think it's helpful that we had so many at home in this month. It's allowed us to claw back so many points. But I'm not too worried about the fact that we've got 4 away games remaining out of our last 6 games. I'm not that concerned about that. I think we've done the hard work so far, albeit not done the job yet, but we've done a ridiculous amount of hard work to get ourselves into the position that we're in now.
I agree. I think, I'll be honest, that break between the 16th and the 29th posed so many challenges for us for so many different reasons. Now, going into the later, it's weird because coming off Bristol Rovers and another 5-0 result and having scored 16 goals in 3 games, everybody knows what the stats were for that run because they were, we published them as often as we could, didn't we? And they were all over social media. But I was riding the high coming out of that Bristol Rovers game. But then in the few days leading up to Leyton Orient, that high had gone, and I was just feeling nerves upon nerves. And I'm looking at it, and I'm literally second guessing myself. I'm looking at the running, and I'm thinking, yeah, but I don't think we can do. Suddenly, Reading away just looks so much harder than what it did a week ago, even though none of us have played. Leyton Orient now suddenly seems like a really difficult match for a different reason as well. More mainly because Ethan Arahan's no longer in the squad for that game. There was also, like I said, the break. Are we going to lose the momentum? Suddenly, that looks now more difficult, and constantly second guessing myself and nerves. So then I kind of came into the game yesterday, and it might have been you who I said it to in the fan zone, I can't remember, but I turned around and said, if we don't beat Leyton Orient, for me, that's it. That is it for the playoff run. Now, unbelievably pessimistic, probably, but I'm looking at it, I'm thinking, because I've not really been looking at the gaps to teams. I've just been looking at how many points we need. And I've always been having it as, let's say, 76. And for 76, we needed 5 wins from our 7 remaining, before Leyton Orient. I'm thinking, right, we could afford to drop points in 2 games. I don't want to be dropping points now. If we could drop points in the middle of April and the end of April, maybe. I don't want to be dropping points now. So that was kind of my feeling. And then again, I just felt so nervous during that Leyton Orient game. And I don't know what it is, because I said at the start of this run that, look, whatever happens, happens. We're just going to enjoy it. I'm not that, I'm not going to get hurt by it. I'm just going to enjoy what's happening. I feel like I was very, very naive when I said that now, looking back at it. And suddenly we're in this position where, like I say, I was really, really nervous going into this game. Before then, Jovan stepped up.
Oh, indeed, yeah. I agree with you. I felt exactly the same. I hadn't felt massively nervous in any of the previous 3. I did it Stevenage a bit because I felt at the time that was a bit of a make or break game, and there was just a bit of an acceptance after that, thinking, oh well, that was good fun. Whereas this felt bigger than that because we were closer, and it felt like a real 6-pointer, and it was that gap as well, because I remember I actually went into the pub in Rugby directly after the Bristol Rovers game with Gary's dad, Pete. And we both agreed, said, Arahan's red card, that was a shame, but Ted will step in there for 1 game, it'll be fine, don't worry about it. And we were both pretty confident after that. And then just like you, the closer that this Leyton Orient game got, there were a few of those other factors kind of started to become a bit more prominent. So the fact that we may have lost a bit of momentum because of the break, it gave Leyton Orient, of course, a week and a half or so to prep for this game specifically. They're going to have to be able to put a lot more kind of tactical analysis into this game than they would previously have had time to do so. So yeah, I think I was like you and became a little bit more nervous. And then during the game, depending on the other team's results, my mentality changed over and over again, to be honest, because when we were drawing 0-0 and Oxford were winning, I felt really quite desperate at that time. I thought, it's not in our hands anymore, because even though we were behind Oxford, it felt like it was in our hands because we was only 2 points behind with them still to play. When Shrewsbury scored, and it was 0-0 in our game, I was fine then. I was absolutely fine then. I was like, I can relax. It's just as you were, a game fewer to play. No one else has gained on us. We've still got Oxford to play. Everything's fine. And then, of course, just for that magical moment to happen in the last minute, that just catapulted us to another level. But I think there's one thing that we haven't really touched on yet, and that's that we've only conceded 1 goal in these 5 games. And that's where it starts. That's where it starts, doesn't it? As much as the 5s and the 6s are incredibly satisfying and entertaining and fill you full of confidence, it's the nil at the other end of the pitch that just gives you that foundation to go on and be successful. And I read Gaz's article a while ago. We don't like to reference Gaz's articles too much in here, do we? But I think it was a really interesting point that he put in there, because I think under a certain Mr. Cowley, there's been a lot of comparisons, I think, between our current run and the feeling at the club now, and the kind of run-in of the promotion-winning season from the National League. There's a lot of similarities in regard to games, a lot of similarities in regard to just the feeling around the club. And there was something that was always synonymous with that team, which was just a complete refuse to lose mentality, which I think is definitely evident now. But I actually think it's more than that. And Gaz put this in his article. It's find a way to win at any cost. So we're not just refusing to lose; we're finding a way to win because we were not at our best against Leyton Orient, and I think that's credit to them more than anything. But we found a way to win, and that's a sign of a good team. Halfway through the season, you look at performances as barometers of how the rest of your season's going to go. So even if the results aren't necessarily perfect, you look at performances, you look at the trends, and you go, "Oh, it indicates that this is what was going to end up like towards the end of the season." But we're at the point now where it is all about results, and look at them.
They're so special, and like you say, I really want to pick up on the defensive side of it. But I think the best way to pick up on the defensive side of it is to actually look at our best 11s, because I think there's a really interesting discussion about defence in there as well that we shall have a quick look at now. And here we go then, Chris, the best 11s. Now, we don't have one each this time because we have the same one. So there was obviously no point making two separate graphics for that. Let's just have a little look through it. In goal, Lucas Jensen. Let's just start with him for a second, because Lucas Jensen he's had his critics throughout the season, specifically more towards the start of the season. We've spoke about him on the monthly show and in podcasts, and we've defended him at many a point and said he is a really strong keeper. Now, he's joint for most clean sheets in the division at the minute. Looks like he could very easily get it with the run that we're in. I just think he has been absolutely outstanding. Like I just mentioned off air, getting man of the match when we win 5-0 and one of our strikers gets a hat-trick. I mean, what kind of a stat is that? It's just incredible. When you try and explain that to people, they jaw on the floor like, wow, was he really that good? Or was there another reason that they gave it to him? It's like, no, he was genuinely the best player on the pitch that game. And he's been doing that week in, week out for us, hasn't he?
He has. Yeah, he has. So there's a really interesting statistic on Y-Scout. So if anyone could hear the clicking in the background, I apologise. I was just double checking at something here. So Y-Scout is a platform that we use for a lot of our statistical analysis. Lucas Jensen is statistically the best goalkeeper in League One. By lots of metrics, he's made the most saves. He's had the most rush outs. But the biggest, because it's quite difficult to analyse goalkeepers specifically because it's part of a team performance, isn't it? It's very difficult to analyse just goalkeepers specifically. Most people just look at like goals conceded, but that's a whole team effort. A goalkeeper, of course, is very much part of that. But there's a really interesting statistic here on Y-Scout, which is called goals prevented. So it is the XG of all the shots that have been faced compared to the of shots on target, that have been faced compared to the amount of goals that have actually gone in, because the ones that are on target, of course, reach the goalkeeper. So it's a direct indication of how well your goalkeeper is performing. And of course, the keepers that perform worse in the league will maybe concede a few more goals than the XG suggests they should. The better goalkeeper you are, the more goals you have prevented accumulatively over the season. So the number I'm going to read out here is basically how many goals more than we have conceded that we should have, if not directly, for Lucas Jensen. So unsurprisingly, Lucas Jensen is first in the league. I'm going to go through the top 5 here. So 5th is Liam Roberts of Barnsley, who's prevented 3.84 goals this season. Reading's Joel Pereira is 4th on 4.18. Burton's Max Crocombe is 3rd on 4.38. Bolton's Nathan Baxter is 2nd on 4.44 goals prevented. Lucas Jensen is 1st on 9.13. Absolutely mental. That's more than double anyone else in the league in terms of sheer shot stopping ability. Now, the criticism he's had is his kicking, and he probably kicks one goal kick out of play every game, and he gets a few moans and groans, and people moan about that. And I get it, you want it to be perfect all the time, but he's the best goalkeeper in the league at everything else. Coming off his line, claiming crosses, and preventing goals, which is what a goalkeeper is there for specifically. Now, no, as a goalkeeper myself, of course, we'd all know there's more to it than that these days. But ultimately, if you stop the ball going in the net, you're doing a good old job. And he has prevented 9 goals this season. So 9 goals that we should have conceded that we haven't, directly because of him. And that is more than double anyone else in the league.
There is more to it, but there's only more to it when you're already at the top level at shot stopping. Your first and foremost job is to keep the ball out the back of the net. If you want to go on.
I was just thinking, I remember when Pep came into Man City that first season. Joe Hart had been there a good few years. Joe Hart was England goalkeeper, good goalkeeper, but didn't have the kind of playing out ability. And then he brought Claudio Bravo with him anyway from Barca, who was very much a ball playing goalkeeper, but he couldn't save any shots. He was horrifically bad at just being a keeper. I don't know the actual numbers, but I remember at the time looking into it, and his goals prevented was minus so many extra goals, and it doesn't matter. You can all well and good playing out from the back, but if you can't stop the ball going in the net, it's pointless. You might as well have a centre back in goal. And obviously the elite keepers like Alisson, Edison, etc., and others have got the whole package. But Lucas Jensen is categorically the best goalkeeper in League One. He could walk into a lot of Championship clubs this season and be a starting goalkeeper for them. And I've been a fan of Lucas since we've signed him. I think he's grown into the team as the season's progressed. I would say this time, not this time last year. Of course, he wasn't here this time last year, but maybe before Christmas, I would say, he used to say to me, "Is Lucas Jensen capable of playing in the Championship right now?" I would say maybe not quite. He's a very, very good, solid League One goalkeeper, but where he is now, he's grown and improved and progressed. To be honest, just like every single player in the squad has under Michael Skubala. It's just absolutely fantastic. But I think it's really absolutely right to point Lucas out there, because other players are going to get the headlines, and that's always the case. So it's absolutely right to point Lucas out there. But yeah, you know what? I was just checking Wisecout then, obviously. I knew he was first. I didn't realise it was first by that amount. So that was absolutely nuts.
Oh, I only did know that he was first by that amount because there was a piece on the Real AFL recently, which it was a very, very good goalkeeper article. So, make sure to go check that out. Cheeky little plug. So let's go through the rest of the team, because there's a couple of little talking points that we'll pick up on, but let's just go through the whole team first. So right wing back, Lasse Sorensen. I mean, we say it every month. He picks himself. Left wing back, Rico Hackett. Again, I think he's absolutely outstanding. There are games that suit him more than others, but that's to be expected with any wing back. That's the same with Lass. It's just often the way of that position. But again, I think Rico Hackett has just been outstanding ever since coming back for that 20-minute cameo at Wickham away back in January. Obviously, that was the start of the run when he came back from his injury. Not saying it was purely on Rico Hackett, but my God, has he helped during this whole period. The back three of Sean Rowan as the left-sided centre-half, Alex Mitchell on the right, and Paudie O'Connor at central centre-half. Again, we'll discuss that one in a minute, because there is a pretty big omission in our best 11s, but it's not his fault. In that number 6 role is Ethan Aaron, with Danny Mandroyu and Jack Moylan as the 2 number 8s. I mean, Jack Moylan, he picked himself after Barnsley, I think, absolutely. Do you know, even Stevenage, when he played in that role...
it was Stevenage, really, because he started there. We was all surprised, and he was great in that game. In a game that I think at the time a lot of people thought that just wouldn't suit him at all, playing in what most of us felt was not a natural position for him at all, against a team that's going to really test him in there. And he was superb. And then, of course, Barnsley was great. It was great against Cambridge as well. Well, he's been good in every game he's played, to be honest. But of course, they're the ones that get the highlights, aren't they? And the headlines.
But yeah, no, Stevenage, he set himself up for a really solid month, from the get-go, like you say, playing in that slightly unnatural position. And then Joe Taylor, who he's really been in the goals, hasn't he? And then Ben House up top with Joe Taylor. Again, I think we'll potentially touch on there in a second. But in fact, let's start with that.
Okay.
Taylor and House, then, Chris. Why them, and why isn't Freddie Draper in your best 11?
Mainly for Freddie, because he's been in and out of the team with injury recently, and these two have become our preferred pair. Joe, of course, has pretty much guaranteed a starting spot with how many goals he scored. He is the one that isn't involved massively in link-up play. He's a good presser, but isn't really a huge link-up player. His job is to put the ball in the net, and he is doing that. hardest part of football. How many times earlier in the season did we kind of complain, but also look at the positives in saying that we're good in the first 2/3, but we just need someone to put the ball in the net. Once we get someone that can do that, we're fine. But that's the most important part of the pitch, and we've got someone here who is not just capable, but is currently proving that he is capable of doing that. So I think he picks himself, and I think Ben House, being the senior player in that position in the squad, picks himself. I just don't think there's another player in League One that does what he does. I think his abilities of pressing forward is second to none in this league. Yeah. I have to say, in terms of both Jovan and Freddie, obviously Jovan came on and scored a fantastic goal against Leyton Orient, but I think Jovan was really good when he replaced Ben against Cambridge, and was really good against Bristol Rovers as well, so much so that we didn't miss Ben. I think that's a huge credit to Jovan. I think he's really improved, just like so many players have under Michael Skubala.
Yeah.
So they're not just, I don't think it's a top two and then a kind of second tier here of players. I think we've got all four of them are very different and have different strengths and different attributes which can change games. And I think that was proven yesterday against Leyton Orient, because when Freddie came on, he offered a very different threat up top, and his back to goal play just helped the ball stick just higher up the pitch. His link up was good. And that gave us a real different dynamic. So I certainly wouldn't be against others starting, but I like the others coming off the bench at the moment to offer something different. So at the moment, I think these two pick themselves, but the other two aren't miles away at all. They are very much part of a squad game. Now, it always feels a bit silly kind of picking 11 players, because it is a squad game these days, isn't it? But in terms of who would I prefer to start if everyone was fit, yeah, those two for those two reasons.
No, I agree. I think Ben House is... I mean, look, Joe Taylor, he gets the goals at the minute, which is absolutely brilliant. He's proper informed striker, and what he does so well. And he's a nightmare to play against, I'm absolutely sure. And we were talking earlier on about the difference between going home and away, and I bet Joe Taylor's the sort of player that will be able to thrive in certain away games where the opposition are playing a slightly higher line, because they're at home, they're expected to be going up against the opposition. Joe Taylor can just say, right, okay, you do that as much as you want, I'll just stand on your shoulder, and that's it. He'll go and he'll get chances and get opportunities, and we'll see that within this final month. So there's a cracking player in there. But Ben House, look, last season I had him as more or less player of the season. It was obvious. Look, Paudie O'Connor got most of the plaudits in terms of player of the season last year, and rightly so for a lot of it. For me, Ben House was very much there or thereabouts. I just thought he was absolutely outstanding. And we've had a conversation a few weeks back, I remember, Chris, because we were talking about Ben House and the difficulty in keeping hold of him in the summer, for example. Because Ben House is the sort of striker that fans up and down the divisions may not necessarily take notice of, because he might not have the highest goal scoring numbers, but in football circles, he will be one of the most highly rated strikers and sought after strikers in the division, because of exactly what we said. He does so much of the game that is quite often missed when you're just looking at baseline stats. He does so much of that perfectly. So yeah, absolutely. I obviously agree with you on those two picks, but a huge sort of shout out to Jovan. Like you said, I think he was absolutely outstanding in sort of his few games that he's played primarily, and so pleased for him to have not just got his first league goal for us away at Barnsley, but if we're being honest, like, yes, okay, you have to be there to score and all of that. It more hit him than anything else. But what he did yesterday, he didn't just score a goal, he created a goal, he set himself up, he had the confidence to run at a defender. Like, it just shows what Marcus Skubala has brought into the team in terms of mentality, and I think Jovan's kind of the perfect embodiment of that. But look, let's look at the defence now. We alluded to it earlier. Rowan, O'Connor, Mitchell at the back. They have obviously been outstanding. We know what the defensive statistics are like. We'll have a little chat about them in a second. But why is Jackson not in there, Chris?
Because he got injured, and these three played ahead of him, and they haven't put a foot wrong.
Yeah,
Jacko hadn't put a foot wrong prior to getting injured, so he was rightly keeping his place in the squad. But these guys have come in for him. Same reason. So the same reason that we said previously that Mitchell wouldn't get in the team because he had a week or two out. Someone else came in and replaced him, and they didn't put a foot wrong. So for that reason, Adam Jackson for me has been one of the most consistent players for us this season. It wouldn't have been far away from player of the season for me, really wouldn't. But for no fault of his own, he's lost his place in the team, not through poor performance by himself, picked up an injury, and the guys that have come in to replace him haven't, like I said, have conceded one goal. So that's the reason why you can't. I don't think you can change this at the moment.
No, I 100% agree with you. It's really, really harsh on Jacko because I agree he's probably been one of, if not the best player all season. So to not have him in the squad, therefore, seems ludicrous. But dropping one of those three centre halves also seems ludicrous. So I'm kind of glad that we haven't in that sense, just because how strong they have been. All right, so Chris, let's have a little bit of a look then at how these line up on the tactics board.
Ooh, just before we do that, can I just mention Danny Mandroyu quickly? Because this time last month, I think we both said that Ted Bishop was undroppable. And Ted Bishop has lost his place in the team for the same reason Jackson did. Nothing too serious, thankfully, for Ted, but lost his place in the team. And we had a game where we had to play a midfield three of Irahan, Moylan and Mandroyu. And Danny Mandroyu has been a player that has, I think, split the fan base a little bit this season. And I was always trying to see the positives in things, generally speaking. And I think I've probably backed Danny Mandroyu more than most, but I certainly struggled to see where he fitted into this system. I really didn't see him being a player that was capable or had the tactical discipline, at least, to play in that deeper role. I think ball at the feet, as a ball playing midfielder, and a playmaker, I think it always made sense, but I just didn't think he had the tactical discipline to play in that role. And he came in by necessity more than anything.
Yeah.
And it's been superb, absolutely superb, just like Moylan has. Moylan will take the plaudits because of his couple of outstanding performances that he's had in, but they kind of overshadowed Danny Mandroyu a little bit, but he's been just as good, to be honest, I think. And so much so that I think I would, right now, pick him marginally over Ted Bishop. I like them both. Like if either of them played. So if it was Bishop and Mandroyu, if it was Bishop and Moylan, or if it was Moylan and Mandroyu, I'd be pretty satisfied in any games coming up. And bearing in mind that I think both of us would have picked both Conor McGrandles and Ethan Hamilton over them if they were fit. I even if they were all fit now, I think I would still pick this midfield three. And that is just credit to these guys who have got their opportunity in the team and taken it with both hands. And that's what you want. As a manager and as a fan, you want players that have been on the fringes to come in with a good attitude and to take the chances when they have been given to them. And they both have. So Ted, I think he's been superb. Again, under Michael Skubala, just as we've said it over and over again, we've said it over and over again. So many players have improved and just playing with such confidence. But for me, the difference that Danny Mandroyu has over anyone else in the team is his vision. I think he sees passes that no one else in this squad can see. Not even Ted. Ted obviously sees a good pass, but he's really good at driving with the ball forward. That's his biggest threat. I think Danny Mandroyu's just vision of spotting a pass that others don't see is second to none. So even if he's not having the best of games, I think he's almost worth keeping on the pitch, providing he's playing okay, because he is someone that can create something from absolutely nowhere. So the pass to set up Lassie's assist against Barnsley, what a pass. And he actually did something similar yesterday against Leyton Orient through to Joe Taylor in the first half. It ended up in just a bit of a half chance, but kind of a clever kind of lofted reverse pass. Like no one else would see it. Simple as that. No one else would even see it. So I just think big credit to Danny Mandroyu for forcing his way into the team, because I just could not see how he fitted into this shape. And he's fitted it like a glove. So fair play to him.
Agreed. Absolutely. I think he has been exceptional. And to be honest, I was always a massive supporter of Danny Mandroyu, even through the tough times, because I mean, I think it was the end of January and that monthly show, and I actually had Danny Mandroyu in my best 11 over Ted Bishop. And this was after Ted Bishop had a really, really solid January and Danny Mandroyu had been out suspended. Because I just always felt that there was a really solid player on the ball. And I actually felt like this this, not necessarily the formation that we were playing or anything like that, but the system and the style that we were playing under Marcus Caballa was going to end up suiting Danny Manjoya really, really strongly. And I think that's very much sort of come into fruition at that point, because he is, like you say, brilliant on the ball. He can create chances out of more or less nothing. And I mean, look, even earlier on in the season when we were kind of struggling under Mark Kennedy, he was up there in terms of smart passes at one point, which is a stat. I know smart passes in itself, it just sounds absolutely ridiculous, because any pass that actually makes it to the right person is a smart pass. But smart pass is one that penetrates the defensive line, isn't it, Chris? So he was top of that, and those are the sorts of players that you want. You want at least one of those in your team. And to be fair, I mean, we've probably even got quite a few more than just the one, and that's a huge credit. But second time lucky then, Chris. Let's get to the tactics board. And here we go then. On screen now is one of our favourite parts of the monthly show, isn't it, Chris? It is the tactics board. We do love just playing around with this. Now, Chris, I've lined it up in I don't know, what formation would you call this? Would you call it a 3-5-2? Yeah.
Yeah.
So a 3-5-2. Obviously, we went through the best 11 and potentially which players would be in those certain positions. But here is how we would expect it to be lining up in game, and how it has been lining up in game. Now, we were talking off air, Chris. There's not actually that much to talk about in terms of this shape at the minute, is there? Because it's not really been that many changes over the past month. But why don't you talk us through what hasn't changed? What's the standard kind of system we're playing at the minute?
Yeah, so we've this has definitely been our in possession shape for the majority of the time. Sometimes one of the deep midfielders, we play kind of this sort of 3-4-1-2 shape at times, but it's basically a back three, 2 wing backs, 3 central midfielders, and 2 strikers in one way, shape, or form. That's how we are all pretty much always lining up. And I think what we've settled on a little bit now is an identity, to be honest. And I think we've been edging towards this for a while. We've certainly seen that we've been out of possession in a 4-4-2 shape at times, which we still are. Less often recently, to be honest, and it's certainly quite a fluid formation. But in possession, we very much have those roles. So yeah, like you said, there's not a huge amount to say in terms of those kind of positions on the pitch. I think it's more style and methods, which is really just progressed, I suppose, continued to progress, probably is the way to put it. And then that word identity, I think, is a big one, because there's been a real shift in how we play now compared to how we played for the first half of the season under Mark Kennedy. There's been first third of the season, should I say. It's poles apart now. And you're going to talk us through quite a few statistics that kind of show this in a little while. But yeah, in terms of formation, I think we're pretty settled now, really, in regard to system. And what we've seen recently now is when we have had players missing, rather than changing the shape to accommodate the new players coming in, we've made the players fit the system. So I think that shows that the system is something that the coaching staff are really comfortable with and confident with and settled on. And it's now a case of making everyone else fit into that. Whereas when they first came in, it was probably a case of developing a system which got the best out of the players at our disposal. I think we've kind of started to shift that now, because everyone, I think, knows each role on the pitch a bit better than they did before. And the results obviously show it's working.
Yeah, absolutely. And they do. Now, you kind of alluded to the fact that I'm just going to throw out a load of random stats. And quite frankly, that's exactly it. Because basically, we've just had a little look on these off camera, Chris, and kind of just ended the conversation with "we're good," and we are. And
yeah.
I'm just going to kind of discuss that in a minute. So there's loads of different time periods here that are really important. I think first of all, we have to look at, if you like, the league table from the 13th of November, which was the date that Michael Skubala was appointed. Now, since Skubala has been appointed, we have earned 41 points, which actually sits us fourth in that time frame. 41 points from 24 games. 11 wins, 8 draws, 5 losses. Bear in mind, that had a really, really difficult run in December as part of that, didn't it? Now, I think then the next bit that we kind of have to, the next sort of period that we have to look at, and that is obviously going to show us in good stead because we are winning so many games at the minute, is kind of from the 13th of January till now, which puts us in second in the league on 32 points. Now, I want to pick that one up in particularly because that goal against Wickham, the last minute goal that was scored, I feel like it's kind of forgotten about that it was a last minute goal in that game that got us that 1-1 draw. I remember walking out the ground and sort of people saying, "Oh, that's great. We can now take that momentum into was it Peterborough first and then Derby?"
I forget which way around it was, but it was those two big games that were at the time we were quite concerned about. I think in terms of if they come up on the wrong side of those, the winless run continues as it was at the time, and performance against Wickham were good. Of course, performances improved significantly against Derby and Peterborough, but we still didn't win.
No.
And then, of course, that took us to the end of January, didn't it? And it's then from that point that all these numbers start to kind of really pick up and become really impressive. But you're right. It all started from that last minute equaliser against Wickham. And it was a deserved equaliser. I think it's worth pointing out. It wasn't a smash and grab. That particularly in that second half, we dominated that game. There was a good half an hour spell where Wickham could not get out of their half at times. We were pinning them in, and it was the most dominant attacking performance I'd seen from Lincoln City this season. Just, we'd had good wins previously, but in terms of us actually just pinning a team in and they couldn't get them out, just suffocating them, that was the most dominant we've been, and we deserved that last minute equaliser. And what a springboard it was.
Yeah, exactly. It was momentum and then some. So from that game, well, from before that game, so from 2:00 on the 13th of January. Since then, we have scored 28 goals in 14 matches and conceded only 4. Now, for comparison, the next highest scorers in the league were in that same time frame are Bolton on 26, so we're 2 better than our nearest challengers on that, but they've played 2 more games than us. Next closest who played the same amount of games as us, a Peterborough with 25, and obviously we're 3 better than a Peterborough side that earlier on in the season and for most of this season have been hailed as one of the best attacking sides in the division. We're better in terms of our defence. And again, we've spoken at length already about how strong our defence is. But since then, we've conceded 4 goals, as most people will know, in those 14 games. Portsmouth, next best defence in that same time frame, have conceded 11. We're the only team over the past 14 games to have conceded single digits. And for the record, that is the same even if you head it back to the start of January as well. So you include the whole of 2024. So that we're not just kind of manipulating stats and things just to say that we're looking good. Because you can make stats tell you something that maybe isn't even true sometimes if you start trying to manipulate certain things. But it's not what we're trying to do here. We're using the stats to kind of prove what it is that we already know, and it just helps show it off a little bit because that's very much what the monthly show is about in that sense. Now, I also just want to mention our the table by period in the game, the first 15 minutes of games, and the table of the first 15 minutes in games, because we've spoken. I mean, earlier on this month, bearing in mind, we scored very early against Barnsley. We scored very early against Cambridge, very early against Bristol Rovers. We'd scored very early against Shrewsbury as well, if I remember correctly. Port Vale, we scored very early as well. Exactly. So the first 15 minutes of games, we're top of the league. That's over the whole season. That's not over the last 14 games. That's over the whole season. We're top of the league. We've scored 11 goals in the first 15 minutes of games. That joint best in the league. We are top of the league with 10 wins. So we're winning the game. We've been winning the game on 10 separate occasions by the time the clock turns on to 15 minutes. And that puts us clear of Bolton in second by that metric, who are winning in 8 of those matches. We're only losing in 3 of them. We conceded 4 goals, which is, not quite the best. Ironically enough, the best in that metric is Carlisle, but it
which is bizarre, isn't it?
It certainly is, but it is one of the best. It just shows how strong we are from the absolute get-go. And Chris, what is it that makes us so strong early on?
bear with me a second. Let's put my glasses on for this. So this is a statistic. So anyone that listened to the podcast that Ben and I did on Thursday will have already heard this to an extent, but I appreciate maybe not everyone has. So there's a particular statistic called PPDA, which stands for passes allowed per defensive action. And it is effectively a measure of pressing intensity and also pressing success. So what it means is how many passes on average do the opposition have before you stop them having the ball in one way, shape or form, either winning it back, giving a foul away or forcing it to go out of play. So at the point where Mark Kennedy lost his job, we had the highest PPDA in the league, which meant that we were the most passive team. Now, we all know that I maybe retrospectively haven't been the biggest fan of Mark Kennedy's football. And there was I put quite a big thread out on Twitter at the time that showed metric-wise, even though our performance in the league was decent in terms of our place in the league, that the numbers suggested that we were going to fall down the league. So there was a few things that kind of indicated that. But what it doesn't show is that's just by having the highest number for this or being 24th in the league for this doesn't necessarily mean you're a bad team, but it's just an indication of style more than anything. So how intensely do you try and press the opposition, how high up the pitch you try and press them, but also how good are you and how successful are you at pressing? Because you could press really high, but easily get played through, which means the opposition still gets lots of passes allowed. So it's basically an indication of how high and how good you are at pressing. So under Mark Kennedy, we were last in the league for this. Our PPDA was 24th. I haven't actually got the number, but I think it was around 18. So around 18 passes allowed per defensive action. The best in the league, just to give you, or the lowest in the league, should I say, is Bolton, who are just a shade under 8 passes allowed per defensive action. So that's the benchmark for the team that's the most intense pressers is Bolton. And at the time, we were the most passive team under Mark Kennedy. The average for us has now decreased down to 12.5. So that's quite a big drop from 18-ish where it was before. Still actually puts us in 22nd position though. But of course, we know we're a very, very different side now under Michael Skubala than we were under Mark Kennedy. So I thought it was worth, well, let's just compare it for the last 10 games and see where we were. Now we've really got this identity and this system kind of set. And in the last 10 games, our average PPDA is now down to 9.17, which places us 6th in the league, which you can see, okay, well, that shows that we are definitely pressing much higher, much more aggressively. But we've seen that with our eyes, and it's just nice to see that's the case, kind of in the numbers as well. And then I thought, I wonder what it is in the first 15 minutes of the last 10 games on average. And I compared this to Bolton's again as well, not just their average over 90, but what their average was over their first 15 minutes as well. And our average PPDA in the first 15 minutes of the last 10 games, this doesn't include Leyton Orient, by the way, is 7.93, which is the lowest in the league. So we have gone under Mark Kennedy from 24th and being the most passive team to first and being the most aggressive team out of possession. You can't change any more than 24th to first. And I think that this has transpired in the fact that we've scored early goals, picked up the most points in the league from those first 15-minute goals. I just think, it all makes sense. And sometimes, like you said earlier, stats can be manipulated. You can manipulate them to try and, certainly in isolation, you pick and choose the ones you want to say to kind of make a case for you. But what we're doing here is combining lots of different things together to build a real clear picture, showing this is happening and this is why it's happening.
But it's also, what I appreciate with it so well as well is the fact that it's different from team to team. For example, it's not necessarily something that happened that much against Stevenage. We weren't necessarily pressing too high. Against Leyton Orient yesterday, for example, it seemed like the certain trigger was more when it went to the fullback. And then occasionally when the goalkeeper was dilly-dallying on it as well. But the two centre-halves, they could potentially have the ball a little bit longer. And we weren't pressing too highly when they had the ball. And it's those little kind of pragmatic changes that are being made that mean that we're so strong against most opposition that we've faced. In fact, every opposition that we've faced, because even those where let's say Stevenage, for example, where we struggle to really make too many opportunities. They also couldn't really make too many opportunities either. So it was very much it works effectively on what it is that we're doing there, which I really appreciate.
Yeah, I think this is just one thing for me to say, because, like I said, we all like seeing it because it's exciting football for a fan's perspective, because it means even when you haven't got the ball, you're generally watching the game being played in the half of the pitch you want it to be played in, because we're pressing so high. But what I will say is, from a player's perspective, it's harder to play like that. It's much easier to play in a low or mid-block shape. It's energy conserving. It's more risk averse. You're less likely to concede, but this gives you more opportunities to win it back and score. But it's harder. And if you make one bad run, like one aimless run, if you just run aimlessly at a centre back, but it's not part of an actual structure for pressing, it's so easy to pass around you, and then you're out the game. So it's higher risk. It's more physically and mentally taxing. So the fact that we've got the defensive record that we have, whilst transitioning to playing this really high pressing style, is just super, super, super impressive. But I think it's just worth pointing out, this is harder from a player's perspective. It takes so much more concentration, so much more physical work, and it's more of a full team dynamic and full team kind of effort here. Whereas if you're sat in a low block or a mid block, it's a case of just condensing space. It's about keeping spacings. Whereas this is about, there's so many individual triggers. You just mentioned there, game by game, there's so many different ones, and everyone has to be on it, because often we find ourselves 2v1. That's how we win it back at times. And you've got to know when to go and jump from the position you're on at the moment to then go jump onto the next player. It's so kind of orchestrated, and I just wanted to point out, really, to say this is harder. It's so much harder, and it's much higher risk. And the fact that we're so, the statistics show that we're so successful at it is a credit to coaching team, of course, for clearly making it all make sense and being really clear in their coaching methods, but also the players are buying into it and just putting that physical effort in to be able to keep doing it, because we're relentless with it. Absolutely relentless with it. Particularly our counter press is relentless, and it's automatic now. I think that's what's really impressed me the most. Is you can see when it was starting to be built a little bit, certain players are getting it quicker than others, and you can never criticize anyone for not working hard, but it was working hard in the right way. And now it's just automatic. Everyone's on it, and it's just brilliant. And the phrase I've been using in the last 3 weeks is I try to avoid being kind of just sickeningly positive, because I know no one likes to see just someone just as constantly glass half full all the time. But it's just so hard not to be impressed with where we are right now. So let's just give credit where it's due. As you said, we are good. Let's enjoy being good. And it's just be interesting to see now, of course, and really exciting as to where it might take us.
To the championship. Yeah, so 100%. And the word of the day is clearly good. So why don't we have a little bit of a look at which certain players have been able to stand out? And I mean, it's very, very difficult to stand out when the whole team is performing as strongly as they are. Let's have a look at the players that have stood out this month. And here we are then on screen now. You can see a fantastic photo from yesterday's game. Credit to Graham Burrell. Of course, as ever, Joe Taylor.
Wasn't a fantastic finish, that one, though, was it? Unlike in recent weeks.
That was rather poor. And you know what? Almost took him off play now.
I'll let him off one.
I agree. He does realistically deserve Player of the Month, doesn't he, Chris? Because God, he's in fine goal scoring form, and he was both of our picks, actually.
Yeah, indeed. And as you said earlier, really, the hardest part of the game is putting the ball in the net, and that's what he was brought in to do. And he could quite feasibly finish as the top goal scorer at 2 separate football clubs this season. Yeah. And that's just amazing, isn't it? He's brilliant. He's absolutely brilliant. I have to admit, it took me a couple of games to really understand exactly what Joe Taylor was. And once I kind of saw, and once he announced himself to us, my goodness me, what a player he is at this level. And there have been so many positive performances this month. You know, Jack Moylan's burst onto the scene. Paudie O'Connor has been just super consistent. We mentioned Lucas Jensen already. This was tight. I just think we've often praised players in other parts of the pitch. We've often praised our centre-backs, for example, even when we were scoring a few goals and we were getting wins. We've given, I think, our back three player of the month more times than we have any other part of the pitch as well. And I think sometimes you have to just credit when the person that puts the ball in the net, because that's the hardest thing to do. And he's done it 8 times since he's been at the club. And that's a lot in just a few games he's played. So, yeah, player of the month for me, and I think for you as well, is Joe Taylor.
Yeah, he is for that exact reason. We can praise the defence all season. And when it comes to player of the season, chances are it'll be the defence that are leading in the sort of voting for those kind of areas because of how consistent they've been all season. I mean, Alex Mitchell as well, none of us have really mentioned today, but he's been outstanding. He got man of the match in yesterday's game, for example, in what was a really, really difficult game. And it was a deserved man of the match as well. So, he can very much be up there. But like you say, you have to praise sometimes just scoring the goals, because it's something that we've struggled with at certain times. So it's really nice to kind of have a player that we can praise on that front. But going to the back three, we normally would have the Stacey West Readers Player of the Month from the player ratings. But basically, Gary has decided that he can't really be bothered putting that together at the minute. So no, that's okay. I'll let him off. But we didn't want to. We could have done it without the Leyton Orient ratings, but we kind of felt that was just a little bit wrong because it was, again, sort of maybe manipulating it slightly. So instead, we've got Gaz's Player of the Month, and he's gone for Paudie O'Connor. He could have gone for Alex Mitchell, look, because he's still there, but no, he has gone for Paudie O'Connor for the exact same reasons that we've spoken about. It's the consistency at the back. Captain by name, captain by nature sort of thing this month, and he's still been such an integral part to what has been one of Lincoln City's best months of football that I can remember for a long, long time.
Yeah, nothing to add really, other than he's just been a real leader, hasn't he? A real leader for us. He's been a rock at the back. He's been the him along with Jensen has been the spine of that defense that's only conceded 1 goal this month. So completely understand why Gaz has gone for him. So yeah, it was so tight between so many people, wasn't it, this month for us? I know we say that most months, but it really was difficult this time around, because there have been, as you said, it was the most impressive month of football I can remember for a long time as a Lincoln City fan. So how do you pick one individual from those excellent team performances? So the fact we've got one from each end of the pitch, I think, kind of says it all.
Absolutely. And I've just got on the next slide one more player, because I think he deserves a massive honourable mention. And do you know what? He can get Young Player of the Month, even though Joe Taylor's only like 20 as well, isn't he? So, but we can give them a separate kind of metrics. Young Player of the Month. For me, Jovan has just come on so much. We spoke about it earlier, the confidence that he's playing with, obviously getting that goal yesterday. We defended Jovan in a way at certain times, but also maybe I've been a little bit harsh on Jovan at certain points. I've said he wasn't anyway. When we were talking the back end of 2023, I said on this podcast, on the monthly show, whatever it may have been, that he wasn't a League One player, but he was chucked into the deep end probably too quickly for his development to lead the line in a single striker formation of a League One side that were potentially struggling at certain points and had injuries up in that kind of attacking half of the pitch. And yet he never. You could say he had games where maybe he didn't do too much. I don't think it's fair to say he ever really had a bad game, but he also never really had any games that specifically stood out as outstanding in too many ways. And I know it's probably easier to be coming in and having good games when the whole team's performing well, obviously. But Jovan has come in, and we said the other week after that Bristol Rovers game, he came in and you didn't realise that Ben House wasn't in the squad. Now, for Jovan to come in and do that, I think says it all. What type of player he is. His physical build can help you in certain situations. Probably great to be coming off the bench against a side like Leyton Orient yesterday. But then to score that goal with his relentless pressing and the footwork to be able to get into a proper shooting position from where he won the ball back. Huge credit to him. And I had to include him in this somewhere because of what must have been rather difficult of a season for him at certain points, where he was getting a lot of sort of abuse and just people genuinely saying he wasn't good enough and all of this. To have come out the other side of that and to now be looking like he's flourishing in development in a really strong Lincoln City side. Great to see.
Yeah, it really is. And I was unsure about Jovan at the start of the season. Similar to you, similar to most people, I think. I again saw his stature pre-season, thought, wow, this guy's going to really come on. But I didn't really think he was ready to be a first-team player. I mentioned this before, he's the only one that hasn't had that breakthrough loan yet, and we felt that that's what we needed. And then my mind was changed much earlier than most people, I think. It was the Wolves under-21s game, because he started in that game, and he played really well. But I was thinking, right, this is where we're going to see what level Jovan is at the moment, because playing against an age group side rather than a men's team, I felt that would be a game where it would be kind of almost a game of peers with him, a team of similar caliber. And he bullied them. He absolutely bullied them. And I was like, oh, he's a step above that then. Wow, that's great. And I just saw some little flashes of potential there. We all know his stature. He started to use it well. He had neat feet at times, not always making the best decisions, but he's a young player, you learn that. And then you said he got thrown into the deep end a little bit. But I think before that, he actually came off the bench a few times and looked impressive, so much so that a lot of people were calling for him to get an opportunity in the team. He then got that, and of course, in a really challenging situation for the whole squad and the whole club, really, struggled in a struggling team. And I think maybe was probably quite harshly treated by some. And I felt in January he just needed a loan. He needed to go and have that breakthrough loan.
Agreed.
But also, I think credit to Skubala for taking him out the firing line and clearly helping him improve his game. And we've all seen in the last handful of games how much he's improved. But I think the biggest thing that's impressed me about Jovan more than anything is just mentality. Yeah. Because, if you're a Sean Rowan, who, not even Sean Rowan, he had a bit of adversity as well, but someone that's kind of breaks into the team, all guns blazing, and then you kind of keep your place in the team because you continue to play well and you become like a fan's favourite, then that's, you've never had the challenge. The fact that Jovan got an opportunity, then had a bit of adversity as well. I imagine that must have been so difficult as a young player because I think it's so easy to forget how young these players are. And they need patience, but we were desperate for a centre forward, so you can't always be patient when we were desperate. So I get where the frustration came from. But it was there's no denying it was challenging. So for him to kind of come through that, clearly a stronger person mentally as well as physically, kind of more capable and clearly technically more capable as well. But I think that comes from confidence. I think it comes from confidence and belief. And Michael Skubala and the rest of the coaching team have instilled that clearly in him. But we've mentioned it throughout this show today of how many players that we've noticed that in. I just don't think Jovan Makama even takes the shot yesterday a couple of months ago. And it's just so great to see, because he is, along with Freddie Draper, Joe Taylor and Ben House, very much a part of this first team squad. And all four of them have very different attributes and can worry and trouble opposition in different ways. I don't think there's a definite kind of first, second, third, fourth in that pecking order now. They do all have their value. And I just think Jovan I agree, he just deserves enormous credit because he has been criticised at times this season. And I think when he does well, it's not just because he scored against Leyton Orient, because obviously that is the icing on the cake. It was a lovely moment for him, as well as all of us. But it was those couple of performances before that, the game against Cambridge, and then, of course, the start against Bristol Rovers. I actually felt he was going to start yesterday ahead of Ben House, which I think is a credit to Jovan in itself. The fact that none of us were desperate for Ben to start because Jovan had played so well. Obviously, Ben did get the start. So, it's just really positive, and all four of them are really threatening. And we've got 6 games to go, and I think they're all going to play a part. All four of them up top, and very much all of them are part of that first team squad.
And how nice to see.
Bearing in mind we didn't have a striker for most of the season. Now we've got 4 that we can rely on.
Exactly. And it, like I say, it is just so nice to see. Now, I was just trying to find my notes, and I can't find them actually. But basically, it was for the what game was it? Bristol Rovers at the start of September, and Jovan came on with about 10 minutes to go. And I remember there was an opportunity late on in the game where basically the ball had kind of sort of dropped to him, but he didn't seem to have the technical ability to know what to do with it, and his decision making was also quite poor as well. In fact, I think there was a couple of opportunities where he was able to win the ball with his physicality, but in terms of technical ability, couldn't really do much with it after that, and he made the wrong decision as well a couple of times. And I remember kind of making the point on that one. I said, look, there could be a player in Jovan, but he's got to be nurtured, quite a lot, and he's not there yet. Yesterday, he made the perfect decision. He clearly had the technical ability to dance through defenders and get the shot away. So that in itself, it's almost a carbon copy of what happened against Bristol Rovers, where he was able to use his physicality, win the ball back. This time, he made the right decision, and he had the confidence and the technical ability to break through and get the shot away. So huge difference in his game. So again, it was why he needed mentioning. But look, we've looked back at the month of March. It's been a great month. Let's have a very quick look to April. And here we are then. 6 cup finals. Yes.
And none of them against Peterborough.
I was maybe in May.
Maybe not yet.
In May we might end up having a cup final against Peterborough, which could be absolutely fantastic as long as John Busby isn't the referee. So in the month of April we have got Carlisle on Easter Monday. Yeah, felt a lot more comfortable about Carlisle on Easter Monday before they went to Peterborough and took the piss. Reading on the 6th of April. That is going to be a huge away game. We're taking a huge following down there. You're away that weekend, aren't you, Chris, if I'm not mistaken? So
yes, Gaz and I are away in Birmingham for our mate Dave's stag do. So we're very, very inconsiderate of him to organise a stag do.
It is actually
during the football season. Really,
you do know there are trains from Birmingham to Reading, so just quick return journey. You and Gaz.
You know what? I would love to, but Gaz is best man, and I just don't think either would be allowed to escape. So we'll be glued to our phones that afternoon, though, I imagine.
I do hope so, absolutely. I think I'm staying down in Reading now for the night as well, so that could end up being a very, very good night. We have got Wigan at home on the 13th, Oxford away on the 16th. That is a 6-pointer if ever I've seen it. However, little point on that for those of you that may not have seen it. Oxford's week that week, so on the 13th, they face Peterborough. On the Tuesday night, so that's on the Saturday. On the Tuesday night, on the 16th, they face us. And then on the Friday night now, they play Stevenage. So they've got 3 games against 3 playoff contenders, if you like, in the space of 6 days. So that could very much help us out being in the middle of those, but who knows. Cheltenham away on the 20th of April. Cheltenham's an interesting one. They could be down by that point. They could still be fighting for something. So don't count that as a victory. Not at all. And then Portsmouth at home on the last game of the season. I saw a tweet this morning, Chris, that said, wouldn't it be nice if Lincoln are already in the playoffs by that point? Portsmouth have already won the title. And it was a Portsmouth fan that said it and just put, is there a chance that we can just get the game abandoned and all just go on the pitch and have a big piss up? I mean, it'd be quite nice just to all be in the fan zone rather than actually having to care about the football on that day. But at the same time, I would also love to win that game to have momentum going into the playoffs. But I've counted me chickens. We're not in the playoffs yet. Calm down.
Yeah, and I think that's the thing. We've given ourselves the best opportunity we could.
Yeah.
But we're not there yet. And we have got 4 away games out of these next 6. Some winnable, of course, but it's not going to be easy. There's going to be twists and turns now. I'm confident, not only because we're on a great run, but actually because a lot of our rivals are not on brilliant runs. They're not on consistent runs. But that doesn't mean that they're not going to be in the next 6 games. There's going to be so many twists and turns. Carlisle away does feel like a massive banana skin to me. Not as much as me and Gary are recording the podcast directly after this. So I've done the Carlisle prep.
And I'm recording the preview directly after this.
Oh, there you go. Amazing. And they beat Peterborough yesterday, scored 3 good goals, but they were low XG goals, most of them.
Oh, they're awful.
Yeah, Peterborough created loads of chances. So, of course, the fact that Carlisle actually have created half decent chances in the last handful of games, not getting the results they wanted previously, obviously while beating Peterborough. I'm not as concerned after seeing that they weren't the better team against Peterborough, despite the result. So it's not going to be easy because they're still going to be fighting for their lives. I think they still don't. I think realistically, most of them expect to go down, but they're not mathematically down yet. So while there's a chance, they're going to be fighting for it. But I think if we can continue the form that we've shown, because let's not forget, and it is easy to forget this, we're the best team in the league at the moment by most metrics, if not all. So if we continue to play as if we're the best team in the league, we should beat them, regardless of a little bit of an upturn in results from them. We should beat them. I'm expecting 3 points against Carlisle. I don't think it'll be simple, but I'm expecting 3 points against Carlisle. I'm expecting points against Reading because I think Reading are a really good side. Wigan, home game, might be a tight one as well. I'm hoping if we can come into the Oxford game with 7 points out of those 3 games, which is a big ask. We might get 5 points out of those 3, which I think would be acceptable. But I would love to go to Oxford with a buffer, not just be on the same points.
Agreed.
But a buffer. Because if we can go to Oxford and just know that we need to not lose to stay ahead of them, I would then be confident enough for us to see it out. But anything can happen yet. But I don't expect us to pick up maximum points out of these 6 games. As odd as it sounds, bar the Portsmouth game, if there's something on the Portsmouth game, I don't think we'll lose it. If magic happens and we are actually somehow in the playoffs by that point, I'm kind of discounting that. So I, as mental as this sounds, I'm expecting us to finish the season in terms of meaningful games unbeaten, which feels arrogant. It feels arrogant, but I just can't
do you know what?
see
it doesn't though, does
where
it?
a loss is coming from.
Yeah, it doesn't. It felt arrogant because I said something very similar after Port Vale, and that felt arrogant because it's like, okay, we've not actually done that much. We've won a few games, but we had a lot of draws in January. We'd also had like a draw in February as well, and that felt arrogant when I said it. But I don't feel it does anymore because it is the way that it's going. And I mean, look, if we can get into the playoffs on the back of a 20-game unbeaten run. Jesus.
The thing is, that's what it will be at that point, which is just, and that's why it seems ridiculous to suggest that I think that's what's going to happen. The evidence suggests that is possible, doesn't it? Yeah. And that's just, football's weird.
We might not be needing that free cancellation in the end. We might actually be needing those hotel rooms.
It's starting to look like a wise decision in the end.
It is. But look, I'm going to say in those games, I'm going to be a little bit more pessimistic. Not because anything's pointing me to that. It's just because I don't want to get ahead of myself and I don't want to get disappointed by predicting too much. So I'm going to predict 12 points, right, from 6 games. 12 points from a possible 18. Now, Carlisle, I'm going to predict as a victory. Reading away, I think is going to be very, very difficult. If I'm honest, I think Reading away is going to be very, very difficult.
That's the biggest challenge. I think we're going to good as well.
Agreed.
But the fact it's a home game, I think, is positive for us.
Yes.
And the fact that they've not got a huge amount to play for now. So
agreed. I think Reading is probably going to be one of the
currently in the green room telling us to hurry up.
Do you know what? Let's bring Gaz in. Hey up, Gaz, how are we doing?
I've been waiting 13 minutes to do the podcast.
That's Chris's fault.
Bollocks, is it? I mean, it normally is. But it
1 hour 26 minutes.
It's just my fault.
You went on about PPDA for a long, long time. That's on you. Gaz, those 6 games that we've got in the month of April, how many points are we getting?
Well, you put me on the spot a little bit there.
I have. Do you need to read through them?
Okay, let's go. 1 at Carlisle, 1 at Reading, 3 against Wigan, 3 against Oxford, 3 against Cheltenham. So what's that, 11? Let's stick on 11 points.
Okay.
But I don't want... I've done the breakdown there, but I'm just going to say generally, 11 points. So, we may win at Carlisle, lose at Wigan, etc. But I can see 11 points from that. So,
okay. So I've gone 12. Chris, did you actually put a number on yours?
No, I was 12 as well.
You were 12. So yeah, I think Reading for me is the toughest one. To be honest, Reading for me is the toughest one of those 5 before Portsmouth. I'm putting Reading as harder than Oxford.
Agreed.
All right. Well, I'm going to be controversial. Do you know which one I think could be really, really tough on there? Cheltenham away.
Yeah.
Because if they've still got something to play for, and we know a Darryl Clark side is a decent side. We know they can be. They've done really well to get to where they are. They beat Fleetwood, who were susceptible to a defeat at the weekend, and more or less can sign them to relegation, which is great. So yeah, I think that could be tough. Look, let's face it, Carlisle are doomed. So even if they do a stay of execution on Monday, they are doomed. They're going to be playing out their skin. Reading and Wigan potentially. Reading may have something to play for, but Wigan won't. So yeah, it'll be interesting. And Oxford, they're going to come at us. Now we've got the impetus. They're going to come to us. They're going to come at us, and that's what we like. If a team comes at us, Joe Taylor can get in behind. Yesterday, and Chris and I will discuss this on the podcast. Doubtless, it wasn't a Joe Taylor game because there's no space in behind. So
exactly what we said earlier. Going away to some of those guys that are going to want and have to come at us is going to support our strike force tenfold. Cheltenham also, if Cheltenham were even already down by that point, could make it a very difficult game. You only have to look at history. I mean, it seems like a team gets relegated and then they win their next game. I mean, I'm sure there's a stat in there somewhere, but it almost always seems to happen. I mean, the one that immediately jumps to mind last season, Forest Green, Sheffield Wednesday, it happened. So those are potentially ones that you have to worry about.
They could be playing without pressure. But on the other hand, that could reflect the same way on Portsmouth. If they're already champions on the 27th, there's a likelihood they lose the game. And 2 spring to my mind: Sunderland, Wolves. When Wolves were promoted to the Premier League and Sunderland relegated out of the Championship, Sunderland won 3-0. And us in Colchester, we'd already wrapped up the league. We hadn't lost since December the 26th, right the way through to confirming promotion. And then we got stuffed by Colchester in the final game of that season.
Agree. Is there a chance we go into this, as we were just saying, 20 games unbeaten, potentially going into the playoffs? I think that's a good chance.
If we do, it matches our longest unbeaten run in the Football League, doesn't it? Which is currently 19 from the Danny Cowley season. So that was a run that was interrupted by a defeat at Everton in the FA Cup. So actually, in terms of games, there was a defeat in there. But I think it was 19 games. I think might even have been 20. There is a chance we go into it undefeated. Of course there is, especially with Ethan Arahan back. But part of me kind of wishes that we were also thinking, well, we might have McGrandles or Hamilton back for that point, and I know we're not going to. So, I almost look at it. I was almost tempted today to start talking about the injuries that we've got. But actually, really, if you take Hamilton and McGrandles out of it, we're actually in a pretty good place right now. So.
Yeah, absolutely. So, look, I think that will take away the fixtures, because that is more or less it from the monthly show. As we've said, it has been a fantastic March. Could end up being an even greater April, and who knows how great May can be as well. Thank you so much for joining us. Chris, thank you so much for joining me all afternoon. Look, we're an hour and a half of it, let's be honest.
It's not all an hour and a half. There's quite a bit of time I was chatting.
There was.
So, yeah, but I don't know, maybe 1 hour and 15, maybe. I don't know. We're interested to see how long.
Yeah, we'll edit it down. Yeah. We'll edit it down. And Gaz, thank you for joining us for the last 5 minutes of that. Are there any parting words on the month of March from you?
Yeah, it's a pity that I missed 16 of the 17 goals, really. No, look, all I'll say is if Michael Skubala doesn't win Manager of the Month, there's a shady cabal at the top of the EFL destined to try and keep little Lincoln City down, at risk of sounding too much like Steve Evans when I say that.
Well, he is statistically the best manager, as far as I'm aware, in the month of March anyway, considering the points. In fact, no, that's wrong, because Derby have won 15 points. We've only won 13. So, no, do you know what? Michael Skubala doesn't deserve it. Let's not give him it, because people are scared of the curse. So if that can certainly help, then that's fine. But he should definitely be getting Manager of the Season at the end of all of this, especially if it goes the way that we think it very much could. Thank you so much for joining us. Up the Imps.
Up the Imps.
Up the Imps.